Hello and welcome to Motorsport Speak, the motorsport podcast brought to you by Motorsport Week and Motorsport Monday. My name's Dan Lawrence and joining me here is Jack Oliver Smith. We had quite a busy weekend of motorsport action at Motorsport Week and Motorsport Monday this past weekend. It was 4 World Championships all occurring in various points of the globe. We had the Formula 1 in Bahrain, Formula E in Miami, MotoGP in Qatar and World Superbikes in Assen. So we're going to talk about all of them in this one episode, but we're going to start, myself and Jack, talking about Formula 1. Oscar Piastri, his second pole position of the year, backed up with a pretty peerless drive to take his second Grand Prix victory of the year, closing within 3 points of Lando Norris at the top of the drivers' standings. Norris, conversely, having a tricky weekend, qualifying 6th and a troubled run to 3rd place in the Grand Prix, which was interrupted by a safety car. We had overtakes, we had tyre deg, everything we didn't have in Suzuka, in a race that was also characterised by technical gremlins in the Red Bull pit area, technical gremlins on George Russell's steering wheel, Ferrari's troubling pace, perhaps, that maybe got better on Sunday, worrying pace at Red Bull, some surprises in the midfield. We had quite a lot going on in Bahrain, didn't we, Jack? So did you enjoy the race? And what did you make of our Bahrain GP race winner?
Yeah, I mean, it was an interesting one. It wasn't, a classic, but it was a darn sight better than Suzuka. I mean, I tipped Piastri to win the championship before the season started, and he's looking good for it at the moment. I think really the first test for him was how he was going to overcome what happened to him in Melbourne, and he's just bounced back so brilliantly. And, I know what McLaren are like. We know what they say about, they don't really favour one driver over the other. But if Oscar's going to keep driving like this and Lando keeps struggling the way that he did, then they might start looking to him to be the main man, because he seems so assured and he does seem like he's got all the credentials and all the minerals for winning the championship at this point in time.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of agree with you. I mean, if it wasn't for the Melbourne incident, he'd have a nice little points margin at the top of the standings. Instead, he's 3 points behind Norris. But Norris's troubles, I mean, they weren't evident in Japan so much. He seemed to be comfortable there. China, he did struggle, and he aborted both of his final laps in sprint qualifying and main qualifying, and he was second best at Piastri all of that weekend as well, like he was in Bahrain. And I mean, Norris said he was clueless after qualifying in Bahrain. Like, that's not really what you want to hear, and it doesn't sound like it's a quick fix as well. Car and driver really aren't gelling, but Piastri seems to be enjoying it. He acknowledges that it's quite difficult for McLaren to get the performances out of it, but he seems to be able to do so. And as you say, yeah, he bounced back, didn't he, from Melbourne so quickly, because nothing seems to faze the guy. He seems to be he's an Australian Kimi Räikkönen. I think it's fair to say. Like, his radios are consistent. I mean, you saw him on the podium. He's just won a Grand Prix, just boom, cool as a cucumber. And I think in terms of a title fight, that's a really important asset to have. Also, I think, look at his rapid rate of progression. Like, he got thoroughly beaten in qualifying by Norris last year. This year, he's got 2 pole positions. So it's going to be a tricky one for Norris. And as you say, the driver thing, if they're still winning the constructors and Norris is struggling, Piastri's doing well, then yeah, I mean, that sort of conundrum kind of solves itself, doesn't it, for McLaren? Whereas last year, they were more on an even keel. But yeah, it's an interesting one. Norris really needs to shape up a bit, doesn't he? Starting with Saudi Arabia this coming weekend. Also, I think, we're talking about title fight. After Suzuka and Max's heroics in the Red Bull and the win there, which was a surprise, he was only 1 point behind Norris at that stage. He's only 8 points behind him now, but Bahrain was one hell of a reality check for Red Bull, wasn't it?
Yeah. I mean, Helmut Marko said before the start of the season he could see it being a four-horse race with them and McLaren and Mercedes and Ferrari, but they don't really, in terms of sort of the out-and-out package, they don't seem to have it. Suzuka seemed to suit them, which may be due to the sort of the high-speed nature of Jeddah, that maybe the car will fare better there. But it's always been communicated that, via Red Bull, that they were playing things down this season. That RB21 doesn't look anywhere near capable of winning. It's not even like last year's car where the performance dropped off a cliff. Verstappen could still sort of wrestle it round and get the job done. It seems like they don't have the buffer that they did last year, and it doesn't even seem to be anywhere near as good as that car. So yeah, it seems like Red Bull are really going to struggle. I guess the only silver lining is that Tsunoda seems to be a fair bit quicker than Lawson in the car, which is good for them and good for their constructors' hopes, whatever hopes they've got at the minute. But it's very telling that Verstappen is even sort of conceding at this early stage that he's not gonna win the World Championship.
Yeah, I mean, extraordinary. And he even said that they were worse in Bahrain this year than last year, which, I mean, face value, you could say, well, of course they are. They won by miles last year, and this year they didn't win. Verstappen was sick, but there's always the acknowledgement that every year teams progress, but some teams progress better than others. But what he's saying is it's not just a case of Red Bull haven't progressed to the same extent as their rivals. They actually genuinely have taken a step back, particularly with their tyre management, which was poor. But then, as you say, Tsunoda definitely seems to be the right choice, which we both said, didn't we? But in previous episodes, we both said that Tsunoda was probably the right choice. He seems to be, I mean, first of all, got it into Q3 and he got points. So already delivering more than Lawson did in his, albeit very short stint. But in terms of the issues with the Red Bull car and its narrow performance window, Tsunoda seems to be a bit more, I guess, what's the right word? He seems to have accepted it. He's not worrying. He's not panicking. He's going to be methodical in his approach. He knows that it's going to be ups and downs, but he's confident in his own ability, and he's confident in working out the solutions to keep improving. So I think that's exactly what Red Bull needed. I don't think it's going to get them very far in the constructors. It will probably, they're looking at fourth, aren't they, really, unless they improve. And then the big thing then is if they don't improve, Max Verstappen's going to start getting some itchy feet, isn't he? And there's definitely some teams with big wallets that want to look at him. One team, obviously, that's spoken about him in the past is Mercedes. We had the sort of Toto Wolff flirting with Verstappen in the media last year, didn't we? And George Russell being in a contract year this year. Obviously, the future at Mercedes is Antonelli, who's obviously doing really well and getting better every weekend. But it looks like Russell's going to get that contract extension. I mean, there's reports coming that it's going to be $30 million a year, 2-year extension with an option of 2028. And based on his performances, that's a fair deal, I think, for Russell to be given that extension at Mercedes. He's been on the podium 3 times, and his second place in Bahrain, I must say, was very impressive, given the fact that his steering wheel started failing and he had Norris charging behind him and he kept him at bay. So I think just reward for Russell's efforts so far.
Oh, yeah. I mean, George has never seemed to drive a short of confidence at any point. And the fact that he's been able to beat Lewis Hamilton 2 seasons out of 3 in that team is sort of a good showing of that. But I think so far, if he keeps performing the way he is this season, I think this may be the best one he's had yet, because he seems to be so consistent in what he can wring out of that car. And I think that he's adapting to sort of being the team leader, as it were, quite well. He's de facto that, purely because of his age and his experience over Antonelli. But he seems to have adapted to that role pretty well, that he's like the team's go-to driver for putting a solid performance in. And that's what he's done in every race. And I think that, the fact he was able to split both McLarens was further evidence of how well he's been driving.
100%. And Yeah, I think I agree with you in terms of it could be his best season because the Mercedes has improved. Obviously, we've seen that, but the McLaren is the dominant car, and you look at qualifying, he was quite close to Piastri in terms of lap time. He's been the McLaren's most consistent threat in qualifying as well, which I think's been really impressive, and he's just delivering, isn't he? Ferrari, interesting weekend for them, wasn't it? They brought that new floor, hoping that would really elevate them. I think they saw a performance jump, but it wasn't quite as extensive as maybe they'd have hoped. Leclerc, really strong showing, qualifying in third, promoted to the front row after a one-place grid penalty for both Mercedes drivers. Hamilton really struggling in qualifying. I think he was almost 6 tenths down on his teammate, qualifying in ninth, but progressing in the race to fifth and feeling more positive. I think he said it was the most positive he'd felt. A good platform to build on. The only problem for Hamilton is each circuit he turns up to is going to be a brand new one in the Ferrari. They had the concept shift with the front suspension, didn't they, in the off-season? It's not quite yielded them that higher ceiling of development they've been looking for. It's only 4 rounds in, but it does feel like they need to step up their game quite quickly, doesn't it, Ferrari, if they want to be in this title fight?
Oh God, yeah. The billing they had of being like the second fastest car behind McLaren seems quite way off now. It's interesting to see, yeah, how there's sort of been a regression in the car since the Bahrain pre-season testing, and I think maybe we were a bit overconfident in our assertions that maybe Hamilton was going to find his feet very quickly, because I thought he would. But he's been at one team for over 10 years, or about 10 years, and he's going into somewhere completely different, and there's a language barrier, and the car is built in a different way, so it's not built with him in mind. So I think under the circumstances, he's actually doing all right. He is naturally going to be disappointed with the way it's gone, but yeah, I think he did recover well on the Sunday, and he did suggest that he's been able to just about find the way he has to drive the car. It's not the way he likes to drive a car, but it's the way he has to get the most out of this one. And I think he's got to keep picking that up, because if he doesn't, then I think there's going to be a point where later on in the season, if things come down to a crucial moment in a race, they're probably going to have to get him to defer to Leclerc, because he seems to, he's got the benefit of being in that team for a long time. And he's showing that now, because he's actually outperforming Lewis pretty much. But yeah, overall, yeah, Ferrari really do need to, they really do need to think about what they need to do to improve this car, because not only have McLaren got well away from them, but they're going to be stuck in a little mini battle with Red Bull and Mercedes.
Yeah, exactly. And you say, we talk about Lewis, you don't sign Lewis Hamilton to be, charging from 9th to 5th. If you're Ferrari, especially, you've signed Lewis Hamilton because you want to win titles. So both team and driver need to come into harmony, and then the car needs to improve, doesn't it? But it seems to be established from Bahrain. Obviously, McLaren are the pace setters. It looks like Mercedes are settling into that best of the rest spot, ahead of Ferrari with Red Bull. Obviously, their troubles making them probably the 4th fastest team, but it could swing from race to race, as we have seen already. The rest of the field, I'm going to get you to pick out 2 things. Who is your surprise from the rest of the field, your positive surprise performance, and who is someone or someones that you think there's a sort of point of concern?
Well, I think the obvious one on the first one is Alpine, because I think they did a really exceptional job over the weekend. I think if Gasly had qualified, I think, what was it? It was within a tenth, just under a tenth faster, he would have been 3rd. And that is some showing in that car. And I think that, the fact that they've got a Mercedes engine coming soon is further probably reason to be confident. If they had that powertrain now, who knows where they could be? Because it seems to me that that's the quickest one, because the best 2 cars it's the works team and the McLaren. So, but yeah, Gasly I think drove exceptionally well. I think he's really settled in to the sort of, again, a little bit like George. He's settled into that sort of team leader aspect at Alpine. He pretty much eradicated Ocon in that role. So much that Ocon left, and I think the only thing that criticism that could be laid at Jack Doohan's door is that he's maybe just slightly overdriving at times, and that's just the only thing that's stopping him from extracting the best out of the car that he can get, because he's obviously trying to show his best because he doesn't want Colapinto taking the seat. But I think maybe in his case less is more, because I think he's very close to sort of breaking through, and if the car is good enough for Gasly to get into that sort of part of qualifying and to finish where he did in the race, then he's a shoo-in for Q3s and points, I think. From a negative side, it looked like a difficult weekend for Williams and for RB. RB didn't seem to have anywhere near the sort of competitiveness that they've had in the first couple of races. And I think Williams seemed to struggle quite a lot as well. And I guess that's going to build up a bit more in Carlos, because he's scored, I think, is it just 1 point so far this season? And that was through the benefit of people being disqualified in front of him. So I think, to be honest, it's showing that, again, he's having to adapt to a new team, and it's showing that the Albon's the length of time he's had there shows that he's sort of, again, the team leader, even though that Carlos is a proven race winner. So I think they're really the two teams that need to go back to their bases and have a bit of a look at themselves before Jeddah. But yeah, for me, the positive standouts was definitely Alpine, and it'll be interesting to see if they can continue that.
Yes, definitely. Gasly was a massive highlight of the weekend, wasn't he? Doing really well, and it's a shame, like you say, for Williams. Carlos was in that top 10, wasn't he? And performed probably his best weekend so far. Top 10 qualifying, top 10 in the race, until the contact with Tsunoda blew a hole in his side pod, and then that was game over, really. For myself, I'd say a positive highlight would probably be the Haas performance on race day. So obviously, Behrman qualifying last, Ocon crashing out in Q2, and then they both strategy, navigating that safety car period and making the right calls. A stonking opening lap from Behrman, I think, rising like 6 places on the first lap, and then they got a double points finish, 8th and 10th for Ocon and Behrman respectively. So that'd be my positive takeaway from the weekend in terms of the midfield runners. Like a really one hell of a rescue job by Haas there, and a great race by both drivers. And again, we're talking about Behrman, just another like string to his developing F1 bow, I suppose. That first lap, the decisiveness to keep it clean, to keep out of trouble, and then to just deliver to get a point out of that result is really impressive. In terms of worries, Aston Martin, I think, is definitely a team you've got to think about. They've really struggled in Bahrain, and obviously it looks like their struggles from the majority of last year, really. They've followed them, and it's going to be a difficult year for them in 2025. All their chips down for 26. Another driver I think I'd point out is Liam Lawson. Obviously, his 2-race stint at Red Bull really probably obviously dented his confidence, and he's gone back to the Racing Bull setup. And yes, he's only been there for 2 race weekends, but both of those weekends he's been off of Hajar's pace. Hajar being a rookie. Yes, of course, it's only 2 races for Lawson, but I think it's a narrative that he's going to have to start spinning in the other direction, in the positive direction, really soon. So hopefully these first 2 weekends, or maybe this triple header, gets him back, gives him a foundation, and then we can see him really challenge Hajar for the rest of the season. Because I think if he doesn't rise to Hajar's challenge at Racing Bulls, it could mean worrying things for his F1 career. But moving on, we had another single-seater World Championship in action this past weekend, and that was Formula E after one hell of a hiatus. I think it was 7 weeks, if I'm not mistaken. Formula E making its debut at the Homestead Miami Speedway. You were in Miami enjoying the action. So first of all, how did you find the Miami E-Prix in the first Formula E race at that speedway?
I'd be lying if I said I was surprised by the way the race went, because I think we were all expecting another sort of thick pack peloton race again, because it's 2.5 miles long. It's the longest track on the calendar this year. And although they've got the extra power and the all-wheel drive in the attack mode, it was 26 laps, which sort of gave it away that was going to be an issue. I think, to be honest, the drivers didn't dislike the track as much as they disliked other tracks in that vein, like Mazzano. They did not enjoy that, and most of them were quite frank about it. With Miami, they seemed less so. I think they sort of appreciated the challenge to it, the fact that you were going from one surface into another, because you had the smoother out a bit part of the oval, and then going into the infield where it was a lot rougher. And of course, there were points where, in some corner apexes, there's concrete rather than tarmac. So everything was just a little bit of a challenge for the drivers. But it was, again, it was a slightly unusual venue to choose, given that there is a 45,000 capacity grandstand on the main straight, which was by no means full. But I think it's maybe a happy coincidence that by being at the Autodrome for Evo sessions last month means that they've got a good inroad with Miami, and people connected with the organisation of the Miami Grand Prix were at the race. So I think we'll probably see, if they can get it over the line, we'll see them maybe racing at that circuit next year, which I think would be a big improvement.
Yes, I think I agree. Yeah, the Miami International Autodrome at the Hard Rock Stadium, that would be a good venue for Formula E. But then, as we say, we've forecasted it so many times. Gen 4, a circuit like the Speedway, Gen 4, I think, would probably not have the same issues, would it? But that's obviously for the future. And talking of the present, it was a crazy race, given the red flag stoppage with only a handful of laps to go. And then we had a race restart with several drivers with attack mode and not enough time to take the attack mode, which made for confusion and sort of disappointment. You had Norman Nato, who'd obviously had a strong pole position and his first across the line, but he had attack mode left. He had a penalty, and that occurred for several drivers. That meant when the dust settled, we had Pascal Wehrlein taking victory, his first victory in his title defence, getting that up and running. We had a Lola in second, and Lucas Di Grassi for their first points, and what a chunk of points as well. And Antonio Felix da Costa, who was leading the pack before that stoppage, and I guess obviously he didn't have much attack mode and lost out there, but a consistent start to the year for da Costa. What an interesting way for the race to play out, and it gave us an interesting podium.
Yeah, I mean, da Costa's quite rightly said in the press conference after the race that really he was a victim of his own car's superior efficiency, because he'd taken all of his attack mode, and he was looking like he was going to be coasting off for the win, exactly how he did in other races last year, very similarly to how he did it in Shanghai, another sort of big pack race. He timed everything so well and coasted off and won. And I think in the end, because Wehrlein's strategy was slightly different, albeit one that was going to see him sort of tuck in behind for a 1-2, he ended up benefiting because, his da Costa was obviously well on the way to winning. But I think the very tight chicane where the accident occurred, of course, the red flag, it was always going to happen. That chicane was incredibly tight, and it was always going to cause an issue like this. But unfortunately, it's a give or take thing with attack mode. You have to take gambles with it, and a lot of those drivers did, because as opposed to, let's say, last round in Jeddah, where Di Grassi actually took his attack modes very early on in race 2 and just wet side through into the lead, knowing he was going to have to drop back. But the strategy was he was hoping for a safety car, in which case he would have had the result he had last weekend. And I think that the main takeaway from what I got from the drivers I spoke to is that the rules are the rules. Like, you know, one day you'll benefit and another day you won't. You have to feel incredibly sorry for Norman, because it was a weekend where he actually was the superior Nissan driver, which we've not seen yet because it's based around Roland, that team. So, you know, for him to get his first ever pole and to get, you know, another win, which he hasn't had in a long time, would have been much deserved. But yeah, you have to feel, you know, really happy for Lola that after taking delivery of a Gen 3 Evo for the first time a year ago this month, they've got themselves a podium. And I think, to be honest, De Grassi is just about the right person for them to have. He's got so much intelligence and experience that he knows how to play things strategically and in an engineering perspective as well. So there's a lot more to come from them. And I think that as the season progresses, you may see them inching closer under more normal race conditions.
Yes, I was going to say, would you say that is a sign of things to come for Lola? Obviously pointless in the first few events, but would you say that this is a great foundation? We're going to see them start picking up points on a regular basis.
I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if they come away from Monaco with nothing, because it's a different style of race, and you know they're still trying to sort out efficiency, because compared to other teams at the front, they haven't got that efficiency. But there is marked and steady improvement. And Till Bechtolsheimer, the owner and chairman of Lola, has been very candid about that and said, you know, this is not really what, you know, I don't expect them to be challenging right now. I rather am thinking about where we're going to be in London in the final race. And I think that's where hopefully you will see them competing a little bit more. So I think that, you know, to be honest, if we don't see much out of them, even in next season, I think it's going to be Gen 4 where you'll see it really bear fruit, because not only if they're going to be continuing, but they're going to be continuing with Yamaha to produce the powertrain for the app to do the sporting side of it. So I think any Lola fans will just have to be patient, but I think it will come.
Wonderful. And as we did for Formula One, who was your, I guess, I mean, we maybe mentioned some of them, but who was your sort of surprise or positive standout, and who in Miami had a sort of a negative weekend and there's question marks being raised?
Well, obviously Lola and Nato as a team and as an individual were the ones that came away the best, despite the penal, you know, the penalty that rendered Nato to be down from the win. But I think they were really the two main ones. I think the difficulties we saw was with Oliver Rowland. He said he had no confidence in his car in qualifying, hence why he started so far back, and hence why he didn't even have a particularly good race. And a peloton race is actually one in which he normally excels. So that was a you know, particularly a standout in a negative sense. We saw another difficult weekend for Jaguar. The powertrain just does not seem to be as good as it was last season. You know, they sort of, I think, maybe created a bit of false hope by winning the first race and actually looking good in general in the first race. But ever since then, the form's sort of gone off a cliff. And with Nick Cassidy then saying that, you know, it's highly likely that they're going to be struggling up until Gen 4 is going to be you know, that's a pretty big downturn in fortunes for them. And the fact they're losing their team principal at the end of the season as well. You could say McLaren had a difficult weekend, but to be honest, Taylor Barnard's been very candid about how he didn't expect to be P3 in the championship at this point. The car's been good in races that they've competed in, but Miami was not one of them. And given that they are the customer of Nissan, you're not expecting them to be consistently on the same level as them. So I think Jaguar really was from a team perspective, the big standout disappointment.
Yeah, I think I'd agree with you. And it must be such a bitter pill for them to swallow, given that they've been missing out on the title by the finest of margins across a couple of seasons now. But particularly last season's title loss for both drivers was, sort of heartbreaking for both of them. And you'd expect, they're going to get it over the line at one point, but they've taken several steps back. And I mean, yeah, the powertrain troubles are evident in the fact that Envision, their customer team, are also struggling. So. And I think I agree with you with McLaren as well. It's similar to Lola, obviously a few more years advanced, but this is a new team, and we saw it last season. They sort of ebbed and flowed, didn't they, with their sort of form? Sam Bird winning, but then the performances weren't really there for the whole season on a consistent basis. And as Taylor Barnard said, they didn't expect to be where they are right now, so maybe they were due a dip. Weekend. So I think I can give the same assessment as you, even though you're obviously far more of a Formula E expert than I am. But yes, that sort of wraps up our conversation of the four-wheeled contingent of World Championship action we had this past weekend. Coming up, we are talking with Eden Hannigan, and we're going to be talking about MotoGP and the Qatar Grand Prix. But Jack, thank you for joining me and talking about Formula One and Formula E.
Thank you.
As promised, next up, we're talking about MotoGP in Qatar. And to talk us through it is Eden Hannigan. Eden, how are you? And first of all, did you enjoy the MotoGP action in Qatar this year?
I did indeed. It was a little bit of a bittersweet one because, of course, the race I thought was one of the best, if not the best race we've had out of the four this season. We were left a little bit hanging at the end because of a tyre pressure penalty that we will be speaking about. So that was a shame to see that the Ducati dominance wasn't quite toppled just yet, but there's promising signs there, and I think it was a very, very good race and quite a surprising result, depending on how people thought about it coming into the weekend.
Yes, let's crack on with that potential surprising result, and that was obviously Marc Marquez returning to winning ways after his little slip up in Qatar, a blip, as I think we rightly predicted when we last spoke on the pod. So yeah, pole position, victory in the sprint, victory in the Grand Prix, although he was made to work for that one a little bit after the shenanigans with his brother at the start. But, I think it's his first win there since 2014 on the Honda, isn't it? In Qatar. A crazy stat like that. So that's why, I guess, that's why we were saying potentially it was a surprise result, but Marquez showing everybody who's boss. And I guess maybe winning on a track where maybe Bagnaia was more fancied to be the winner. It's quite ominous in terms of the championship picture, isn't it, really? Obviously, Bagnaia had his troubles, which started in qualifying.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, everyone thought that this was going to be the weekend that Pecco won out for the first time on track. Of course, obviously, he won in Qatar, but everyone kind of knew that was because Marquez fell off. If Marquez had stayed on the bike, he would have, without a doubt, gone on to win the race. But this weekend was the first time we really thought Pecco would have it based purely on track dominance, and it never looked like it would get going for him. He, on Friday he did his usual thing of cruising around and then putting a lap in qualifying to make him get into Q2, but then in Q2 it just didn't go well. He crashed and that left him 11th on the grid while Marquez was on pole, and all the problems started from there. And Marquez, while yes, he hadn't won a race up until this point since 2014, he had also been racing against Ducatis, who had been strongly favoured on this track. And now he is on a Ducati at Qatar. We've seen what he can do. And yeah, it's a really, really ominous sign because everyone thought him, Bagnaia and Alex Marquez would have a chance to topple Marc this weekend. And the closest rider to them wasn't even one of those two. It was a rider that nobody expected in the form of Maverick Viñales and also Franco Morbidelli.
Yeah, Morbidelli had a really good, obviously he's doing far better this year than he has done in recent years, but this weekend really felt like a step up for him, being on the podium in both races. Maybe helped by the fact that his mentor Valle was in the paddock. Maybe that helped out. But yeah, Marquez. Also, the thing I find the most striking about Marquez at the moment is he's not really pushing. He's not been pushed for any of these wins. It's not like when he was on the Honda against Dovizioso on the Ducati, and those races were really hard. Or some of those races, I think Misano in 2019 when Fabio Quartararo was, that really exciting rookie pushing him for those victories. Marc has just sort of been able to just bide his time and like take these wins. You look at the Grand Prix in Qatar. Obviously, the scuffle with Alex at the start set him back a bit. Morbidelli sort of cantered off into the distance for a little bit, but it was always a foregone conclusion that Marc was going to win. And it didn't look like huge effort for him, which is really ominous. And I think we're going to get into the European season now, and he could really put in a run together as long as he doesn't make any more Cota mistakes. But yeah, as you said, the surprise challenger wasn't who we were expecting in the Grand Prix. All of a sudden, a Tectoir KTM was in the mix, and none other than Maverick Vinales. Just incredible. Qualified on the second row, so already looked like he had good pace. KTM obviously having some really big problems this year. The money problems of the company nearly going under, and I think they've just development-wise, they've just not taken a step. And I believe from what I've read as well, all 4 KTM riders had different setups and different iteration of the bike as well, which is crazy. Vinales' one was obviously working the best, but it all came undone because of the whole tyre pressure situation, which is such a shame, isn't it? But just talk us through that from your perspective.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say I'm a self-confessed Maverick Vinales fan, and I put a post out on my social media over the weekend saying the MotoGP Championship is so lucky that Maverick Vinales only decides to turn up once every 6 months, because otherwise he would be the greatest rider of all time. And unfortunately, his one performance has been taken away from him this season, because obviously his season it's probably looked worse than what it actually is. I mean, he had a decent pace last time out in Cota, but then had bike problems, which meant that he couldn't really progress anywhere. And then he came to Qatar, a track that, he has a fantastic record at. I mean, I don't think anyone's going to ever forget his first appearance on the Yamaha there. He also won the first round in 2021 as well. So it's a track where Vinales does go very well. And KTM were on the podium last year with Brad Binder in both races. So it's not as big a surprise, but of course, with where KTM have been so far this season, not many people would have expected it. And I didn't expect him to lead when he overtook Marquez. I was absolutely shocked. And there were a couple of laps where I thought he might have this, And then, of course, Marc overtook him. And then when the checkered flag came out and everyone crossed the line, we saw on the world feed that it came up that Maverick Vinales was under investigation for tyre pressures. And I think we all knew then that podium wasn't going to last. But Maverick said afterwards in the post-race press conference that he wasn't really bothered because he'd had the moment. Nobody could take that moment away from him, and KTM just need to keep working. And hopefully we'll see, with going back to familiar territory in Europe, KTM really start coming to the fold, because they really, really need to do that. Enea Bastianini has had a terrible time adapting. Binder's normally up there in the midfield battle. We haven't seen Brad Binder once this season. Acosta is very, very unhappy. We mentioned last time I was here that he could be looking for a way out. So hopefully this gives KTM the boost that they need. And it's a shame it ended in the way that it did, but still a fantastic performance from Vinales.
Yeah, and as you say, it's a shame that it could be his one sort of weekend where he turns up. We've been waiting for years for him to sort of shed this really weird inconsistency that he has, but it seems to be a trait that he can't really shake. So it could be likely that this is his one shot. And yeah, the tyre pressure rule is so annoying, especially when we see it come up. We all know what's happening, but then we go through this procession of them celebrating a podium that they know they're going to lose, which is ridiculous. But then, yeah, as you say, KTM, I mean, Acosta's getting itchy feet and Honda is getting very, I guess, tempted to throw some money around. And they've got a lot of money to play with. And with the start Honda have made to the season as well. I mean, particularly you look at Zarco's performances, that Honda offer is looking more and more encouraging. You've got to imagine as well the amount of money that Honda has at their disposal, and with the rule change coming up in 27, they could probably do a good job of that. I mean, their bike when we had the last 800 Formula, I mean, the Honda was pretty good back then. So yeah, worrying signs for KTM. Yes, next up, sort of, we've been talking about Marc Marquez and his sort of dominance. The other Marquez brother, Alex, I mean, has been doing an incredible job so far in 2024, 2025 even. But his run of second places came to an end because he was maybe a bit overzealous with his Ducati sort of running mate, Fabio Di Giannantonio on the VR46 bike. What did you make of the, I guess, quite... it was a bit of a silly lunge, wasn't it? He punted him off the road, didn't he, Alex Marquez?
Yeah, it was. It's a really difficult one because, of course, I think both Marquez brothers have come out and said the collision that he had with his brother Mark at the first corner of the first lap was completely Mark's fault because he lost the rear going out of the corner, which then meant that they were a little bit further back than they'd expected behind Franco Morbidelli. But that move was purely Alex. I don't want to say doing an Alex, but I've seen him pull similar moves in the past. I remember one on Jack Miller in Phillip Island a couple of years ago where the move is so clearly not on, but he's just decided to brake so late that by the time that, he's reaching the corner, he can't pull out of it, and the only choice is to make contact. And it was a real shame for both him and for Fabio Di Giannantonio, because I think I was watching the early stages of the race and I thought Digia's up for this one. Digia could podium, he could win this. And also with the whole buzz about Alex Marquez potentially finally getting his first win, I thought maybe that was on the cards, but it was a little bit over ambitious. And I think we were all waiting for Alex Marquez to make a mistake this season. I mean, we wasn't sure when it would come after obviously a fantastic run of form at the start of the year, but he just was a little bit too ambitious, ran into the side of Di Giannantonio, did apologise, but I don't think Digia was having any of it because he was very unimpressed that he finished outside of the points, and Alex was able to come home in 7th. I think he might have been promoted to 6th after obviously Vinales' penalty, but the whole order in my head is a little bit still shuffled after that. But yeah, it was a poor move and a deserved long lap as well, I have to say.
Yeah, it's an interesting one as well, you say, with the long lap. And Digi maybe not feeling it's justified. Maybe there was a case for a double long lap. You never know, but that's up to the Simon Crafar and the race direction, isn't it? Really. But yeah, Digi being sort of punted to the back of the field meant that he got caught up in a really unfortunate incident. Obviously, we had reigning champion Jorge Martin making his debut this year on the Aprilia, coming back from nasty injury. There was talk he wasn't even going to do Qatar, but he did Qatar, and he was courageously battling through his injuries there. But a very nasty crash where he got collected by his bike. Digi was involved as well. Martin lucky to get away with that one as well, but he's now facing a really lengthy period on the sidelines, broken ribs. I think there was punctured lungs or lung inflammation or something like that. Not what he wanted, not what any of us wanted, was it really? It's such a disappointing return for Martin to get injured again and in a more severe way.
Yeah, it's such a shame because he was having a fantastic weekend as well. I mean, after first practice, I thought that he maybe wasn't going to complete the weekend because every time you saw him, he'd do a lap and then come down pit lane. He'd take the glove off the right hand, which is the one that he'd injured, off straight away and then go around. But he said after the first practice that he didn't need the doctor. He needed more rear grip or something by the sounds of it from his Aprilia. So he was really up for it. And we saw that in the sprint as well. I mean, he did go backwards in the sprint, but he was fighting and overtaking Francesco Bagnaia at points in the sprint race as well, which was phenomenal to see them doing battle. We potentially saw them battle more in that sprint race than what we did in the entirety of the championship fight last year, it has to be said. But it's a shame that the main race ended up that way. And of course, Digia was very upset after the race because he felt that he obviously should never have been in the position to be near Martin, and it was an unfortunate collision because he had nowhere to go. Martin had, taken a little bit too much curb, and it was one of those where he'd probably lost a little bit of concentration because he's suffering from the pain and obviously the fatigue of it being his first full length race back. So it was a really, really sad way for it to end. What would have been a very decent comeback for the world champion. And I think the main thing is just to see when he can possibly get back. And I don't think anyone wants him to rush back too soon, because you don't want to see a repeat of, the 3 really, really bad injuries that he's had so far. Obviously, going back to pre-season, coming back the first time, it not being fantastic and getting another broken bone. And now, again, with 11 broken ribs, it's just really, really tough. And of course, he's going to have to remain in Qatar for a little while those heal. So, yeah, I guess all we can say is the best wishes to the world champion. And we hope to see him back on track soon, but not at the cost of his own health and at risk of any more injuries.
Yeah, 100%. And from Aprilia's perspective as well, you see Bezzecchi struggling on the bike. Ralph Fernandez is having his struggles. Ayagura seems to be the one leading the charge, and he's a rookie. And then obviously with Martin out, you're going to have Lorenzo Savadori, the test rider, back on the bike. He's a test rider in every sense of the word. He's not really at the MotoGP level in terms of racing, is he? And Aprilia looked like well, it's hard to tell because we haven't had the data of Martin being healthy and in doing these opening rounds to know where they've really progressed or if they have progressed. So, yeah, it's a shame. And it's sort of reminiscent of the times when Marquez was injured and out of the Honda picture. And that's where Honda's whole situation started to really unravel and their problems became exposed. So, yeah, hopefully he can recover quickly and recover well and then get back to some good, strong performances with his new team. But, moving forward, we're going to be heading into the European leg of the MotoGP season now. What do you see happening? Are we really now on the precipice of some Marquez dominance?
I think so. It's a difficult one to say because, you look at some of the tracks coming up and you think that maybe in the past they would have suited potentially Francesco Bagnaio's riding style more. Marquez and Bagnaia had that fantastic battle last year in Jerez, which is the next round of the championship. I think if Marquez had been on the up-to-date bike, he would have had the better of Bagnaia in that race. So it's really, really tough to see. I think it's really, really hard to see anyone other than Marquez dominating. Of course, it can't be like the 2014 season where he won those 10, 11 races to start the year because he's already had that crash in Qatar. But I think it's going to be very much reminiscent of 2019. But if there's somebody there challenging him, whether it be Alex Marquez, whether it be Maverick Vinales or Pedro Acosta, he sounded like he really wanted to battle Acosta at the weekend, Marquez, because he thought Vinales was Acosta overtaking him. And why wouldn't he? So I really hope that we can see a little bit more battling at the front with hopefully a couple more names up there. I'd love to see Fabio Quartararo be able to get into the mix, for example, but that's a lot of work needed for Yamaha. But at the end of the day, I can't see anyone else but Marc Marquez being the dominant force for the next 2-3 months.
That's I think I agree with you. Yeah, it's interesting. It's going to be a one-sided title fight. But as we're going to talk next, we're going to have Henry Cheal up next on the pod. And we're going to be talking about World Superbikes at Assen, where the championship picture is looking a bit more competitive, let's put it that way. But Eden, thank you for talking to us through the MotoGP Grand Prix of Qatar. Right. As promised at the closing of our MotoGP segment, we're now here with Henry Cheal to talk about World Superbikes from Assen. And it was a pretty rip-roaring weekend, full of surprises, great racing, and interesting developments, should we say, in terms of the championship picture. So, Henry, thank you for joining us on the pod. First of all, you were in Assen. What did you make of the weekend?
It was a great weekend. As always, World Superbike is a series that never fails to deliver. We saw 3 different winners, a first-time winner, mixed weather conditions, as always expected in the Netherlands, because it's similar to weather over here, and that played a part as well. So a lot of exciting things occurring there.
Yes, 3 different winners. Crazy. When it looked possible that it could have been a hat trick, because obviously Bulliger starting out the weekend with race 1, a pretty peerless performance without challenge. Then his weekend really did unravel, didn't it? What did you make of his Sunday then? Because it looked like race 1 in the bag, had the Super Pole race in the bag, electrical gremlins, DNF. Race 2 looked like he had it in the bag, pulling out a big lead. Again, in the closing laps, electrical gremlins, DNF. Absolutely crazy. So, yeah, what did you make of Bulliger's weekend and just how it unraveled?
It wasn't really his fault on the Sunday, which makes it even more interesting because obviously just an electrical problem, as you were saying. But it's like that could have been another treble. And at that point, the championship could have been about 50, 55 point advantage at the top. And now it's back to 21, I believe. So it's very close overall. And I think he won't feel too upset because he knows that wasn't any of his doing. And obviously it's not what he wanted, obviously, because he wants to win every race like every other competitor. But it's one that he won't let himself be too bothered about, and he'll just go on to the next one and hope to be as successful as he was at Phillip Island, where he got a treble.
Yes, and interesting, wasn't it, really? Because Toprak being the benefactor in the Super Pole race and winning that one, so not many points on offer in a Super Pole race, kind of damage limitation there. And then in that second race, Toprak making an alternative tyre choice, which really didn't pay off. I think he was languishing. Did he finish 7th in the end? It wasn't a great result for Toprak. So again, a bit of a let off there for Bulliger. But I mean, and then at the same time, with Toprak finishing that low in race 2, a win for Bulliger could have really stretched out his points advantage. So he's really lost out there. But I think it's interesting as well that we're going to Cremona next, which really looks like it should favour the Ducatis based on the evidence of last year. And Toprak doesn't have the benefit of going there in the past because he was injured and out last year when they went to Cremona. So that's, really interesting. But as you say, Bulliger's misfortune as well kind of paved the way for, in race 2, a new winner. So one of our 3 winners was Andrea Locatelli, who has been in World Superbikes for some time now and, playing second fiddle to teammates. And it's now in a place where it's kind of upon him to lead the charge for Yamaha. He's looked really good, I think, at the start of this season as well. And it wasn't really a shock result in terms of his pace through Assen was good all weekend, wasn't it? And it's just really great to see him finally get the monkey off his back and have a win.
I was delighted for him because, as you say, he's come so close. He's been on the podium dozens of times. Second, I think, 6 or 7 times as well. So that first win was knocking on the door. And obviously it wasn't in the way he maybe hoped because Bulliger had that retirement in the final couple of laps, and it just makes you think that he would have just come second and it would have been a good result anyway. But to win in that manner, probably not the way he hoped. But again, I don't think he really cares that much because the win is what he's been so close to achieving in recent times. And I think this win will provide a lot of confidence to him and to Yamaha going forward.
Perfect. And then, as we said, Locatelli was a massive benefactor, wasn't he, really, of that race 2 DNF for Bulliger, but Toprak wasn't able to capitalise. And other than the Super Pole race, which you could arguably say the victory came there maybe due to the mixed conditions and obviously Toprak, his ability, in those situations you could really put your money on him, couldn't you? But his weekend, the BMW just wasn't there. It was, I guess, more similar to where BMW was in the season opener in Phillip Island, wasn't it? And Portimao was maybe more of a blip. Just not the weekend that the reigning champion wanted, was it? And kind of worrying going forward as well for his championship defence.
It definitely seems BMW are lacking. I mean, it was crazy watching during the Super Bowl on the Saturday just how much time they lost in that final sector in particular, because Toprak was red, which obviously means he's lapping fastest all throughout the whole lap, and then that final sector he loses about 4 or 5 tenths, which is an extortionate amount, obviously, around Assen because of its high speed and the characteristics of the track. But I think for his weekend in general, he won't be too upset because that Super Bowl win, I think, was his first WorldSBK win in the series in wet conditions. And I think that's something that he's obviously not yet done before until then. So that's a positive there. But considering what happened to Bulliger, I don't think he'll mind too much. But lots of work needs to be done on that Bavarian bike to get back to where it was last year.
Yeah, 100%. And another, I guess there was more than one first, wasn't there? In Assen, we had Sam Lowes on the Mark VDS in his second season in World Superbikes, getting pole position and then also getting his first podium in the Superpole race, which was, yeah, and then being really emotional as well when, in Parc Fermé with his family there, which was great to see. Good run of pace in all the races, really. He was in that front fight. Bautista took him, well, didn't take him out, lost the front, didn't he? And collected him in race 1, which was a shame. But then in race 2, Sam was still there or thereabouts. So really good weekend and just awesome to see him finally get a podium. Because his initial year of World Superbikes last year was kind of a difficult introduction.
Yeah, I asked him after whether he thought it was his best weekend in the series, and he said it definitely was, because he got that first pole, and it was a great lap considering the conditions. I mean, I think the sun really the hot weather conditions, really suited him, especially on that day. He was probably unfortunate not to pick up that first win. I mean, it was kind of self-inflicted when he fell down to 9th, I believe, in the Super Bowl race in the wet conditions. But he will be very happy, and it's quite crazy how last year it was all hit and miss. He was struggling quite a bit, but now after the Assen round to this year, he's almost bettered his tally from last season after the third round. So yeah, it's plenty of optimism there. But with that Ducati being most likely the best bike on the grid, there's him adapting a lot more and a lot quicker to the bike. He'll definitely be in podium contention even more so for the rest of the year, I reckon.
Yeah, I think as well, Cremona as well, it seems to be a bit of a wild card circuit, so it could play into his hands. I mean, we saw Petrucci win all 3 races there, didn't he, last year as an independent rider? So there could be some more trophies coming Sam Lowes' way. But from Assen, was there any sort of surprises that you saw from any of the teams? Was there any teams that you maybe thought were underperforming or teams overperforming? I mean, the Bemotors looked a little bit better, didn't they? I mean, in the hands of Bassani and Alex Lowes, they seem to have better pace. Was there any teams that showed promising signs, or any teams that there were some massive alarm bells ringing for you?
I think aside from the Super Bowl race, I think Bonovo's Scott Redding and Girl Evans, Andrea Iannone are slightly lacking. It's a bit confusing to me because they both put in blind of a performance at Phillip Island, and then they've kind of just tailed off a little bit. And I think, given the performance of the Ducati at the moment, you would kind of assume that they would be on the same level as Petrucci or Bautista or even Bulega. I mean, we know Bulega's probably arguably the best rider out of the whole Ducati lot at the moment, and that's not really a controversial opinion to say, but it's I think them two are probably lacking a little bit. But in terms of great performance all around, I'd want to give a shout out to Remy Gardner for his podium in the second race, and also because he did that literally 12 months ago last year as well. So we know he loves this circuit, but I'm hoping this could be something more where he could improve and continue that consistency into the next few rounds.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really nice to see Remy Gardner whenever he has success in the World Superbike paddock, because his MotoGP career was sort of cut short and not really on his terms either, was it? So it's nice to see him have some success. But yeah, I mean, it's definitely building up to be a great season, isn't it, really, in World Superbikes? With the, last year there was a bit of a dominance, wasn't there, from Toprak and BMW, but it looks like they've got more than a challenge on their hands this year, and it's the pendulum has swung in Ducati's way. So it's going to be really interesting to see how that unfolds next time out. Heading forward to Cremona, are there any thoughts you have going into the rest of the season? Any sort of maybe potential hot takes you have, or how do you think it's going to play out from here?
I have no idea, and that's part of the fun, I think. I mean, this time round we'll have Toprak there, that'll be his first time at the circuit. Jonathan Rea should come back after what happened at Phillip Island Test, where he's not raced at all this season. So these two riders, Yamaha look better, so Rea could make an impact. But there's many talking points, but I really believe that it's not going to be as Ducati dominated. I don't know. That might be my hot take, but we'll see, because these two riders obviously are two of the best of all time. So it's kind of like they're starting from scratch, but they could easily make some sort of difference because of their world-class ability alone. We'll see what happens, but I feel like Bulliger will definitely be a lot better this year, and he probably would be the man to look into this week for that particular weekend. But who knows? Petrucci might get to complete another treble. You just never know, do you?
Yeah, I think that's what's perfect about World Superbikes, and a perfect way to wrap up our conversation on Assen, which also wraps up this episode of Motorsport Speak. So, Henry, thank you for joining me, and listeners, thank you for joining us. Make sure you stay up to date on Motorsport Week and Motorsport Monday, and our socials at Motorsport Week on X, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, and YouTube. But for now, goodbye.